You clicked for the MiG-23's secret killer. And yes, it lived in the wings and the engine. The R-29 delivered brutal thrust, and the swing wings promised speed with flexibility, but together they carved a flight envelope that punished hesitation and imprecision. We'll break down how high maximum speed came at the cost of treacherous low-speed behavior, why Soviet instructors needed a two-seat MiG-23U to keep pilots alive, and how constant PEG's Red Eagles confirmed the aircraft's instability under real duress. Stay, because understanding this design trait is the key to why the jet frightened its own pilots. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If raw thrust solves everything, why did the MiG-23's strongest feature routinely corner its own pilots? The R-29 promised exactly what doctrine wanted: thrust to weight that let a fighter get moving now, and acceleration that stuck even as altitude rose. The engine spooled quickly for its class, so a small push translated to immediate forward energy, and the airframe's mission logic fit that personality. It was built to sprint, to extend, and to re-enter on its own terms rather than trade radius for rate in a sustained turn. But that same immediacy carried a bill at low altitude where you live inside a tight margin. Rapid throttle changes upset pitch trim because inlet controls and nozzle geometry didn't just feed the compressor, they shifted aerodynamic loads along the fuselage. Asymmetric stores twisted that picture again. A tank on one wing or a heavy missile meant power changes also nudged roll and yaw. On approach, the consequence was simple. Add power and the jet didn't only accelerate, it altered its lift distribution and nose attitude fast enough to outpace the pilot's next correction. Engine-airframe coupling defined the workload. The R-29 responded before you finished the sentence, and the intakes followed with schedule changes that changed local pressure recovery and the downwash seen by the tail. A tiny mistrim near the ground multiplied as the jet either built energy too quickly, ballooning, or bled it with a sink that arrived a beat late. It was like steering a cart where a small nudge moves the axle. Then the wheels turn themselves a little more. The feedback loop runs ahead of your hands unless you slow your inputs. Adversary evaluations consistently logged the same theme: fast, but unforgiving on the backside of the power curve. Stabilizing the approach required disciplined energy management and a guard against over-G. If you tried to salvage a high, tight brake with a snap of power and pull, the airplane could take the thrust. The pilot had to absorb the consequences of that thrust echoing through trim and stability at the same time. By way of example, instructors in the two-seat MiG-23U taught the throttle like a surgical tool. A student who chased glide slope with power on, off, on, set off oscillations the airframe amplified. The immediate fix was counterintuitive. Reduce the size of the inputs and hold them long enough for the pitch to settle, because large corrections stacked lag on lag and the sink rate spiked. The lesson was stable energy, then stable attitude. Reverse that order and the engine punished you. Western contemporaries brought plenty of power, but they avoided the MiG-23's specific combination of rapid inlet schedule shifts and variable geometry stability swings during the busiest phases of flight. An F-4's fixed geometry intake and high inertia airframe buffered some of the transients, and the F-104, while demanding, didn't add a moving wing to relocate the center of lift as you worked the throttle. The MiG made the pilot integrate more changing variables, with less automation to smooth the joins. So extension tactics worked. Light the engine, unload, and the jet ran away. The energy margin rebuilt quickly, and the nose-to-tail trim change at speed stayed inside benign limits. But push the same engine at low speed with the wings set for lift, and the center of lift moved aft as you added power. The nose wanted a different trim state, and it wanted it now, which meant indecision created oscillation, and oscillation created risk. Feature and benefit aligned only at speed. Near the runway, throttle response outpaced pilot bandwidth and raised workload to the edge of safety. With the engine primed to magnify mistakes, we can now move on to the other half of the problem, the wings that moved the goalposts mid-flight. The MiG-23's variable geometry wing unlocked speed. The price was paid on takeoff and landing when nothing stayed where you expected. Sweep defined the airplane's mode of life. Low sweep for lift and rotation, moderate sweep for climb and pattern, and high sweep for dash when you wanted small area and low drag. Each click aft moved the center of lift rearward along the mean aerodynamic chord. So static margin changed with configuration, and the tail needed a new trim state each time. It was therefore a wing that rewrote its own stability notes while you were still reading the previous line. On approach, small configuration shifts had outsized effects. A minor sweep adjustment or a notch of flap altered the lift curve slope and the tail download required to hold angle of attack. The wing gloves blended into the fuselage, and the high-mounted intake shoulders sat in that same flow field. So at higher angles of attack, their interference changed pressure distribution along the route. The net result was a jet that could step from stable to twitchy with a movement that, in another type, would be routine. Aerodynamically, you saw pitch up as the center of pressure migrated forward with local separation near the glove. Wing rock arrived as one panel met buffet slightly earlier than the other, and the roll-yaw coupling followed because the vertical tail felt a sidewash change at the same moment. Boundary layer behavior at the glove and fuselage junction mattered. Once it thickened and separated, the inner wing stopped producing predictable lift, so control inputs translated to a different airplane than the one you trimmed a second earlier. Unlike the F-111's heavier platform with automated sweep schedules and deep chord flaps that carried generous camber at low speed, the MiG-23 asked the pilot to schedule the changes and live with tighter CG travel. It was lighter, it had less benign high-lift devices, and it handed over fewer protections against abrupt shifts in stability. So manual management mattered more, and you had to time the settings so that sweep, flap, and power aligned before you crossed the threshold. Debriefs from Constant Peg spoke to approach surprises. A slight power add produced a balloon because the lift curve slope changed with the configuration and local flow around the glove. If the correction came late, the airplane sank abruptly as the inner wing flirted with a lift brake. The glide slope error looked small until the sink rate built faster than expected. The phrase stuck because it happened often enough to be a pattern, not an anecdote. The training community answered with hardware. The two-seat MiG-23U existed, so an instructor could ride shotgun through that choreography. Call out sweep before flap, then throttle and guard against the instinct to chase pitch with power alone. It was therefore a mechanical solution to a human factors deficit, and by this point it was clear the airplane rewarded anticipation rather than reaction. Risk built during transitions, not just at the endpoints. High sweep penalized turn and lift and kept you honest if you tried to fight slow. Low sweep improved lift and approach speed, but it also sharpened sensitivity, so small inputs bit harder. Move between them in pattern work and you crossed a shifting center of lift while the intakes changed what the tail felt. That was where pilots got caught out. So the payoffs were specific. Western VGs delegated more to automation and used devices that softened the stability swing. This fighter-weight airframe left the integration job to the pilot, and the hazards were specific. Pitch up, wing rock, and abrupt sink from a lift brake, all amplified by sweep-driven center of gravity and center of pressure movement, then nudged further by power. With both engine and wings demanding precision at the same time, reputation hardened fast after adversary trials and the mishaps that followed. The MiG-23 delivered speed by distributing stability across moving parts, and it was therefore quick in a straight line while narrowing the margin where pilots actually lived. By this point, the pattern is hard to miss. Moving wings and fast inlet schedules solved drag, and they charged a stability tax on approach and in the pattern. If you want another variable geometry survivor dissected, F-14, F-111, or Su-24, tell us which envelope traps you want analyzed next. The fear was rational. The data supports it. The jet wasn't cursed. Precision governed it, and imprecision carried a price. One way or another, that shaped how crews flew it.